China's economic growth exceeds expectations in the first quarter. Xia Baolong leaves the city after a 6-day visit. A woman dies in the toilet of Eastern Hospital's emergency ward. Hello and welcome to TVB News. China's economy grew at a faster than expected pace in the first quarter as the end of strict COVID curbs lifted business and consumers out of crippling pandemic disruptions. Although headwinds from a global slowdown point to a challenging ride ahead. Matthew Bray reports.
China's gross domestic product grew 4.5% in the January to March period from a year earlier, according to data released by the National Bureau of Statistics. That figure was faster than the 2.9% in the previous quarter and beat analysts' estimates of 4%. The rebound in the first quarter puts the economy on track for faster growth this year, after it was dragged down last year by various factors, mainly the zero-COVID policy and a slumping property sector. Domestic consumption has been a focus. In March, retail sales jumped 10.6% from a year earlier, the biggest gain since June 2021. Policymakers have pledged to step up support for the $18 trillion economy this year to keep a lid on unemployment, but they face limited room to maneuver amid worries over debt risks and structural woes. The central bank said last week it will maintain ample liquidity, stabilize growth and jobs, as well as focus on expanding demand. On Monday, the PBOC extended liquidity support to banks through its medium-term lending facility, but kept the rate on such loans unchanged, an indication authorities are not overly concerned about the immediate growth outlook. The government has set a modest target for economic growth of around 5% for this year after missing the 2022 goal by a country mile. But while consumption and retail sales have grown, other indicators with weaker growth, such as industrial output and fixed asset investments, indicate an uneven recovery. Factory output lagged in the face of weak global growth, while slowing prices and surging bank savings are raising doubts about demand. China's exports unexpectedly surged in March, but analysts caution the improvement partly reflects suppliers catching up with unfulfilled orders after COVID disruptions. Matthew Bray, TVB News.
Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office Director Xia Baolong left Hong Kong for Beijing this afternoon. He wrapped up the final day of his 6-day trip to the SAR with visits to the University of Hong Kong and several other schools. Timothy Lee has more.
Education is the focus of the itinerary on the final day of Xia Baolong's 6-day tour in the city. At around 11 this morning, the director of the Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office arrived at the University of Hong Kong, accompanied by Chief Executive John Lee and HKU President Zhang Xiang. They visited the university library and the Faculty of Engineering, while learning about the university's development blueprint. The group then had lunch at the University Lodge, the residence of the HKU president. Some students welcomed Xia's visit.
As a Year 1 student from the University of Hong Kong, I feel really happy and exciting because we all heard about this really prestigious person, and it's a great honor to welcome him to here.
Actually, I'm thinking if the tour can go to the canteen of our Hong Kong University, I think it would be very good to feel about how we feel in our university. I think it's a good opportunity to assess the relationship between the mainland university and the Hong Kong University.
In the afternoon, Xia visited secondary and primary schools in Chai Wan and Hung Hom before departing from the airport in the evening. Over the past 6 days, the HKMAO director toured many districts to get a clearer picture of life in the SAR. One of the highlights of Xia's visit was a speech on the National Security Education Day, when he stressed the need to be mindful about anti-China activities. Marking the final day of his tour in the city, Xia Baolong visited educational institutions, including the University of Hong Kong this morning. During his 6-day tour, the director of the Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office talked with many members of the community, including senior officials, members of LegCo, as well as members of the grassroots. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
Chief Executive John Lee summarized Xiao Bailong's visit in Hong Kong with the 6 beliefs mentioned by the senior Beijing official. The city leader said he agrees with Xia's view that rallies are not the only way to express opinions, adding that Hong Kong can't afford to be thrown into turmoil. Jackie Lin reports.
Since Xia Baolong set foot in the SAR, Chief Executive John Lee has been his constant companion throughout the 6-day trip. Looking back at Xia's visit, the CE said it reflects how much care and importance the Beijing official attaches towards Hong Kong. Apart from finding Xia's exchanges with Hong Kong citizens memorable, John Lee said Xia noted his 6 beliefs towards the SAR. First, the belief in the SAR administration to shoulder the primary responsibility of governing Hong Kong. Second, the faith in those who love the motherland and Hong Kong to wholeheartedly support the administration's governance. Xia also mentioned his confidence in the judiciary in safeguarding Hong Kong's national security and rule of law, as well as the city's ability to foster opportunities, adding that prosperity and stability are most beneficial to all walks of life in the city. Xia also made a special mention of Hong Kong youth who are able to take up the duty towards their families, Hong Kong, and the motherland. This as the protest movement back in 2019 left an indelible scar on Hong Kong, and that the damage brought about by the social movement should not be forgotten, Xia said. CE John Lee said Xia's message is clear and that Hong Kong should not and cannot afford to be thrown into turmoil. Contrary to speculation, Xia didn't visit tenants at subdivided flats and public housing estates or representatives from property developers. When asked if that reflects Beijing's dissatisfaction towards Hong Kong's housing policies, the CE said that's just because of Xia's tight schedule here. Jackie Lin, TVB News.
A female patient was found dead in a toilet at the A&E of Pamela Yu Nethersole Eastern Hospital after waiting for more than 12 hours for treatment. Some patients' associations suggested the hospital authority should review A&E procedures and that unaccompanied patients should book a medical escort. Veronica Lin has the story.
The hospital authority announced that the patient was a 58-year-old female with chronic illness. At around 11 p.m. on Sunday, she sought treatment at the Eastern Hospital for fever and cough. The patient was assessed by a doctor the next day and was scheduled for further checkups. Her condition at the time was stable. Hospital staff attempted to locate her twice, first at 12:30 p.m. and again 2 hours later, but to no avail. She was found unconscious at around 4:30 p.m. by staff in an accessible toilet in the waiting area. Resuscitation was performed for half an hour. The case is now being handled by the coroner. The hospital authority says the average waiting time for the A&E at the Eastern Hospital in the morning exceeded 2 hours. Waiting time stretched to 8 hours after 2 p.m. This parent says he and his child have been waiting for more than 10 hours. This man says you must find someone to accompany you if feeling unwell. In 2021, a 63-year-old chronically ill patient at Kuan Hua Hospital died on a stretcher while waiting for treatment. Some patients' associations say the hospital authority should review the triage system, including introducing new technology. Alex Lam, chairman of Hong Kong Patients' Voices, said electronic bracelets could be given to unaccompanied patients so that hospital staff can easily locate them. If an elderly person lives alone or no family member is available to accompany them, escort services may be considered. Easy Home Services supervisor Kui Ga-ho suggests patients should call an ambulance on an as-needed basis. If waiting times are long, they should book a medical escort. Hui added that apart from urgent night medical services, a booking needs to be made 2 to 3 days prior. Veronica Lin, TVB News.
U.S. federal agents have arrested 2 ethnic Chinese New York residents for allegedly operating a so-called Chinese secret police station in the Chinatown district of Manhattan. Beijing has denied the allegations and said the offices help citizens with services such as the issuing of new driver's licenses. Tracy Furness reports.
The defendants Liu Jianwang and Chen Jinping were arrested earlier this morning at their homes in New York City. As alleged, the defendants worked together to establish an overseas police station in Manhattan's Chinatown on behalf of the Fuzhou branch of the Chinese government's National Police Force, the NPS. The NPS has repeatedly and flagrantly violated our nation's sovereignty, including by opening and operating a police station in the middle of New York City.
61-year-old Liu and 59-year-old Chen face charges of conspiring to act as agents of China's government without informing U.S. authorities. They are also charged with obstruction of justice, which includes intentionally destroying and concealing documents and electronic messages between them and representatives of the PRC Ministry of Public Security in October 2022. They were released on bond following an initial appearance in Brooklyn federal court. U.S. prosecutors on Monday also unveiled charges against 34 Chinese officials allegedly operating a troll farm and harassing dissidents online, including by disrupting their meetings on U.S. technology platforms. Beijing's foreign ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin disputed U.S. claims that there was a Chinese secret police station in New York. He said China maintains a policy of non-interference in other countries, and these alleged police outposts are offices helping overseas Chinese with administrative work. The Chinese embassy in the U.S. also said the U.S.'s trumped-up charges on Chinese civilians is merely political manipulation with an aim to smear the image of China. Tracy Furness, TVB News.
Taiwan reportedly plans to buy as many as 400 land-based Harpoon anti-ship missiles from the U.S. In Beijing, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs said China firmly opposes U.S. sales of weapons to Taiwan. Bloomberg quoted the U.S.-Taiwan Business Council as saying that the U.S. Naval Air Systems Command signed a contract with Boeing on behalf of Taiwan, ordering for the first time 400 land-based Harpoon anti-ship missiles. U.S. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy said in an earlier meeting with Taiwan leader Tsai Ing-wen that the process of supplying weapons to Taiwan should be accelerated to deal with Beijing's so-called threats. Still ahead, Sudan's rebel army leader says he agrees to 24-hour ceasefire. Russian leader Vladimir Putin visits Kherson. G7 pledge united front on Ukraine and Taiwan. Welcome back. In Sudan, the lead of one of the two rival military forces, the paramilitary army called Rapid Support Forces, or RSF, said it will adhere to a 24-hour ceasefire to allow civilians and the wounded to be evacuated. This after 3 days of fierce fighting in the capital, Khartoum, and other cities left at least 185 people dead. RSF's General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo said the halt in fighting was agreed upon after speaking to U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Nazvi Karim has more.
Before the weekend, Sudanese in the capital Khartoum and other cities were hoping to start preparations for this week's Eid festival, marking the end of the fasting month of Ramadan. They are instead cowering in fear in their homes as battles between two powerful rival military forces rage around them. Even for a country accustomed to military coups, this is different. Tanks, artillery and other heavy weapons fired in densely populated areas, fighter jets swooping overhead, anti-aircraft fire lighting up the skies, and dead bodies littering the streets of combatants and civilians. The fighting is between two top generals, former allies Abdel Fattah Burhan and Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, each backed by tens of thousands of heavily armed fighters. Burhan is head of the country's armed forces, while Dagalo leads the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces. Both armies cooperated in a 2021 military coup, but a power struggle for control of the country has raised the specter of civil war. The US, the UN and others have called for a truce, Egypt backs Sudan's military, while Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates have ties to the RSF, which supported them in the Yemeni war. All three have asked the two sides to stand down. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, attending a Group of 7 meeting in Japan, said he spoke by phone with Burhan and Dagalo, urging a ceasefire, and slammed fighters for targeting a U.S. diplomatic convoy.
I can confirm that yesterday we had an American diplomatic convoy that was fired on. All of our people are safe and unharmed. But this action was reckless, it was irresponsible, and of course unsafe.
Various diplomats around the world are scrambling to broker a truce while the UN Security Council was set to discuss the crisis. Dagalo has portrayed himself as a defender of democracy and branded Burhan as the aggressor and a radical Islamist. Nazvi Karim, TVB News.
Russian President Vladimir Putin is said to have visited military headquarters in Ukraine to discuss the war with a general from airborne troops and other commanders in the field. Putin was seen descending from a military helicopter and meeting military officials. It was not said when the visit took place. Putin heard reports from airborne forces and the Dnieper Army Group on the situation in Kherson and Zaporizhia. Moscow has proclaimed both these areas as part of Russia, but its forces are locked in a grinding battle in eastern Donbass with heavy losses on both sides. Putin was also seen at a National Guard headquarters in Luhansk. It's the last day of the Group of 7 foreign ministers meeting. The bloc pledged to present a united front on both the Ukraine war and Taiwan issues. In response to their remarks on Taiwan, Beijing said the G7 comments were a gross interference in China's internal affairs. Jackie Lin reports.
Foreign ministers from the Group of 7 industrial powers gathered for a third day to wrap up talks in the Japanese resort town of Karuizawa. In a communique, top diplomats from the G7 nations stressed their unity vis-à-vis a number of geopolitical issues. They include Russia's invasion of Ukraine and China's military maneuvers around Taiwan. The ministers say Russia's threat to station nuclear weapons in Belarus is unacceptable. They pledge to intensify sanctions against Russia while calling for China to act as a responsible member of the international community. The bloc also took another aim at China, the Taiwan issue. The ministers said the G7 nations would stand up to any coercion from China and oppose the militarization of the South China Sea as peace and security in the Taiwan Strait were critical. Beijing said the comments were a gross interference in the country's internal affairs. Foreign Ministry spokesman Wang Wenbin said the comments are full of arrogance and sinister intent to suppress China, and Beijing has lodged solemn representations with Japan, the host country of the meeting. On Sudan, the G7 ministers urged both the military forces and the paramilitary rapid support forces to end hostilities immediately and return to negotiations. The G7 communique is prepared by foreign ministers as a template for state leaders of the bloc to possibly use at the G7 summit to be held in Hiroshima, Japan next month. Jackie Lin, TVB News.
And back locally, artificial intelligence tools such as ChatGPT have become hugely popular recently in Hong Kong, but they could pose risks to users. Stephen Wong Kai-yi, a former privacy commissioner for personal data, said on TVB's Straight Talk program that a set of legal guidelines are needed because it involves the collection of personal data.
In Europe, several countries, started by Italy, has banned, the application of ChatGPT until, the data used to train, the machine complies with the regulations, notably, the personal data protection regulation. Within the set of data on which AI works and ChatGPT works, there must be human experience, human data. Human data must include personal data. So the whole collection, whole bunch of personal data protection principles will come in. Certainly, the authorities are working very hard, to try to contain the problem by introducing new legislation or regulations. So at the same time, the authorities, the data protection authorities, are working on, as we did a few years ago, on standards other than legal standards, known as ethical standards.
Wang, who is now a barrister, pointed out there are technical limitations to ChatGPT. He said the system can get things wrong, and he cannot rely on ChatGPT for his legal work. Wang added another point of concern would be the underprivileged and their limited access to such technology. The 20th Shanghai International Automobile Industry Exhibition officially opened today. The auto show will last for 10 days, showcasing more than 120 new vehicles, including the mainland's BYD electric lineup and a microcar that costs between $70,000 and $100,000. The exhibition's theme this year is Embracing a New Automobile Era, with the event held in an area spanning 360,000 square meters. Participants include more than 1,000 overseas companies and 6 mainland auto manufacturers, including FAW Group, SAIC Motor, and GAC Group. International brands such as Rolls-Royce, BMW, and Porsche can also be seen. And that is the news. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.